Dr. Helen Martinez rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the computer screen again. She had been working at NASA's Deep Space Communications Center in Houston for 12 hours straight. The coffee was cold, and her back hurt from sitting in the same chair all night. But something was different about the signals coming from space tonight. For 3 weeks, the radio telescopes had been picking up strange sounds from the Kepler 442 star system. At first, Helen thought it was just normal space noise. Stars and planets always made sounds as they moved through space, but these sounds were not random. They had a pattern. Helen called her boss, Commander Jake Thompson. Jake used to fly fighter jets for the Air Force before he came to work at NASA. He was tall and serious, with gray hair and sharp blue eyes. When his phone rang at 3 in the morning, he answered right away. "This better be important, Helen," Jake said. "You need to come in right now," Helen said. Her voice was shaking with excitement. "I think someone is trying to talk to us." Jake drove to the Space Center as fast as he could. When he got there, Helen was waiting for him with Dr. Alan Brooks, who studied alien languages, and Dr. Lisa Garcia, who was an expert on space physics. Captain Ron Davis, who ran all the communication equipment, was there too. "Show me what you found," Jake said. Helen played the recording. At first, it sounded like static, but then Jake heard it too. The sounds repeated every few minutes. They were not random at all. Someone or something was sending the same message over and over again. "It's mathematics," Alan said. He had been working on the sounds for hours. "Look at this pattern. 1 beep, then 2 beeps, then 3 beeps, then it starts over with 4, 5, 6, Lisa nodded. "And the frequency changes too. It's following the same mathematical sequence we use to identify prime numbers. No natural process in space does that." Jake felt his heart beating faster. In all his years at NASA, he had hoped for this moment but never really believed it would happen. "Are you telling me that aliens are sending us math problems?" "Not problems," Helen said. "More like a greeting. They're showing us they understand mathematics just like we do. It's like saying hello in a language that any smart species would know." Over the next 2 days, the team worked without stopping. They sent mathematical sequences back toward the Kepler 442 system. The response came faster than anyone expected. The aliens sent back more complex mathematics. Then they sent pictures made of numbers. Simple shapes at first, then more detailed images. The breakthrough came when Alan figured out how to decode one of the pictures. It showed a star system with 9 planets. The 3rd planet from the star was marked with special symbols. "That's their home," Alan said. "They're telling us where they come from." But the next message changed everything. The aliens sent coordinates. Not coordinates for their star system, but coordinates for Earth's solar system. They were coming. Jake called an emergency meeting with NASA's top officials. The room was full of scientists, military officers, and government representatives. Everyone was talking at once until Jake stood up. "Listen carefully," he said. "We have confirmed contact with an alien intelligence. They know where we are, and they are coming here. We need to decide what to do next." General Patricia Wilson from the Pentagon looked worried. "How long before they arrive?" Lisa had been calculating the numbers all morning. Based on their messages, they seemed to be traveling faster than light. If they left when they sent the coordinates, they could be here in 3 weeks. The room went quiet. 3 weeks to prepare for the first alien visitors in human history. Dr. Helen Martinez felt scared and excited at the same time. "What if they're not friendly?" she asked. "What if they are?" Jake replied. "We have to be ready for both possibilities." NASA created a special team to handle first contact. Jake would lead the team. Helen would try to communicate with the aliens. Alan would help translate their language. Lisa would study their technology. Ron would manage all the electronic communications. The team worked day and night to prepare. They created simple messages about Earth and human beings. They made pictures showing human culture, science, and art. They prepared questions to ask about alien society and technology. 2 weeks later, the aliens arrived. Their ships appeared near Jupiter without any warning. The ships were huge, bigger than anything humans had ever built. They looked like giant silver pyramids floating in space. There were 12 ships in total, arranged in a perfect circle around Jupiter's largest moon. The first message from the aliens was different from their earlier communications. This time they sent words in perfect English. Greetings, people of Earth. We are the Corvani Collective. We come as representatives of the Galactic Council. Your species has reached a level of development that requires evaluation. Jake read the message 3 times before he understood what it meant. Evaluation? What kind of evaluation? The next message explained everything. Every species that develops faster than light communication must undergo testing. We call this process the crucible. It determines whether your species is ready to join the galactic community, or whether you represent a threat that must be contained. Helen felt her stomach drop. They're not here to say hello. They're here to judge us. The aliens continued their message. You have been selected for the crucible. 12 representatives from your species will participate in 3 phases of testing. The tests will measure your innovation, your ability to cooperate, and your willingness to sacrifice for others. Success means your species joins the galaxy as an equal. Failure means isolation until you evolve further, or elimination if you prove dangerous. Jake looked around the room at his team. Everyone looked scared, but no one looked ready to give up. When do the tests begin? Jake sent back to the aliens. Preparation begins immediately. Testing begins in 7 Earth days. Choose your representatives carefully. The future of your species depends on their performance. Jake turned to his team. Well, people, looks like we're about to take the biggest test in human history. Any volunteers? Jake Thompson stood in the shuttle as it approached the dark side of the moon. Through the small window, he could see something that should not exist. The aliens had built a massive structure in just 5 days. It looked like a giant metal city, with towers reaching up toward the stars and strange lights pulsing along its walls. How did they build something so big so fast? Asked Amy Richardson, the combat specialist sitting next to him. She was a tough woman who had served in the Marines before joining NASA's security team. Their technology is far beyond ours, said Dr. Lisa Garcia, checking her instruments. The energy readings from that facility are incredible. They're using power sources we don't even understand. The shuttle landed on a platform that seemed to grow out of the lunar surface as they approached. 12 humans stepped out onto the moon's surface, wearing special suits the aliens had provided. The suits were thin, but kept them warm and gave them air to breathe. High Evaluator. Zefka was waiting for them. The alien was tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to glow in the dark. Its eyes were large and black, and when it spoke, the words appeared directly in their minds rather than through their ears. Welcome to the Crucible, Zefka said. You 12 represent your entire species. Your performance will determine humanity's future. Jake looked at his team. Besides himself, Amy, and Lisa, there was Dr. Helen Martinez, Dr. Alan Brooks, Captain Ron Davis, Engineer Kevin Walsh, Medic Dr. Paul Johnson, Geologist Dr. Nancy Clark, Biologist Dr. Frank Turner, Pilot Carol Evans, and Mathematician Dr. Steve Wright. What exactly will we be doing? Jake asked. The Crucible has 3 phases, Zefka explained as they walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. First is innovation. You must solve problems that require thinking beyond normal limitations. Second is cooperation. You must work with others unlike yourselves. Third is sacrifice. You must choose what matters most when everything is at stake. They entered a large room with walls made of some kind of crystal that showed moving pictures. Other aliens were watching from platforms high above. Jake counted at least 6 different species, all looking down at the humans with curious expressions. Many species have attempted the Crucible, Zefka continued. Most fail. Those who fail are given time to evolve further before they can try again. Those who pose a threat to galactic peace are contained permanently. Kevin Walsh, the engineer, raised his hand. He was a practical man who liked to understand how things worked. What happens if we refuse to take the tests? Refusal is considered failure, Zefka said. Your species would be isolated from the Galaxy forever. The first test began immediately. The humans were separated into 4 groups of 3 people each. Each group faced a different puzzle in a different room. Jake found himself with Dr. Paul Johnson and pilot Carol Evans in a room filled with floating geometric shapes. The shapes moved in patterns that seemed random at first, but Jake knew there had to be a solution. "We need to make the shapes form something specific," Paul said, studying the movement carefully. Paul was calm under pressure, which made him a good doctor. Carol tried touching one of the shapes. It responded to her movement, changing color and speed. "They react to us," she said. "Maybe we can control them." Meanwhile, in another room, Helen Martinez worked with Kevin Walsh and Dr. Frank Turner. Their challenge was different. They stood in front of a wall covered with symbols that changed every few seconds. "It's a language," Helen said, "but not like any language I've ever seen. The symbols represent concepts rather than words." Kevin approached the problem like an engineering challenge. "What if we don't try to read it? What if we try to change the pattern instead?" Frank, who studied living things, had a different idea. "What if this isn't about language or patterns? What if it's about growth and adaptation?" In the third room, Amy Richardson, Dr. Lisa Garcia, and Dr. Nancy Clark faced what looked like a 3-dimensional maze that kept changing its walls and passages. "This is impossible," Nancy said, frustrated after trying to map the maze for 20 minutes. "Every time we figure out the path, it changes." Amy had a different approach. In the military, she had learned that sometimes the best way forward was to make your own path. "What if we're not supposed to solve the maze? What if we're supposed to break it?" Lisa was measuring the energy patterns in the walls. "The changes aren't random," she realized. "They follow a mathematical sequence, but the sequence is responding to our movements." In the fourth room, Dr. Alan Brooks, Captain Ron Davis, and Dr. Steve Wright dealt with a communication problem. They had to send a message to something, but they didn't know what they were talking to or what language to use. "We've tried mathematics, pictures, and music," Ron said. "Nothing gets a response." Steve was working with complex equations on a floating screen. "Maybe the response isn't supposed to come through our ears or eyes. Maybe it's something else." Alan had been quiet for a long time, thinking, "What if the thing we're trying to communicate with isn't alive in the way we understand? What if it thinks in a completely different way?" Hours passed. Other alien species had tried these same tests. Most had failed because they approached the problems using only logic or only technology or only instinct. But humans were different. Jake's group solved their puzzle by working together in a way the aliens had never seen. Instead of having one leader give orders, all 3 humans contributed equally. They combined Jake's leadership experience, Paul's careful observation, and Carol's quick reflexes to control the geometric shapes. Helen's group succeeded by doing something that surprised even themselves. Instead of trying to understand the alien symbols, they created their own symbols and taught the wall to understand human concepts. Amy's group broke through the maze by realizing that the real test wasn't about finding the exit. It was about understanding that some problems don't have traditional solutions. Alan's group made contact with an artificial intelligence that thought in ways completely unlike biological minds. They succeeded by learning to think like a computer while remaining human. When all 4 groups finished their tests, Zefka studied the results with obvious confusion. "This is unexpected," the alien said. "Most species approach these challenges using their primary strength. Warriors use force, scientists use logic, collective minds use cooperation. But you humans use all approaches at once." Dr. Helen Martinez felt proud but also worried. "Is that good or bad?" "It is unprecedented," Zefka replied. "Your species thinks in ways that do not fit our usual categories. This makes you either very valuable or very dangerous." The alien evaluator led them to a viewing platform where they could see other parts of the facility. In the distance, Jake could see other beings in similar test areas. But unlike the humans, these beings were not taking tests. They looked like prisoners. "Who are they?" Jake asked. "Species that failed previous phases of the Crucible," Zefka said. "They remain here as subjects for the cooperation phase. You will work with them next. Amy Richardson felt her anger rising. You keep failed species as prisoners. They are given the opportunity to serve a useful purpose, Zefka said, as if this explained everything. Jake realized that the Crucible was more than just a test. It was a system designed to judge entire civilizations based on the rules of whoever created it. The question was whether those rules were fair. When does Phase 2 begin? He asked. Tomorrow, Zefka said. Rest well. The cooperation phase will test whether your species can work with others who think and act differently than you do. Many species fail this phase because they cannot accept differences. As the humans were led to their sleeping quarters, Helen whispered to Jake, I don't think this is really about testing us. I think it's about controlling us. Jake nodded quietly. He was beginning to think the same thing. But they were committed now. The future of humanity depended on how well they could play a game whose rules they were only beginning to understand. The next morning, Zefka led the human team to a different part of the facility. This area looked more like a prison than a testing ground. The walls were thick metal, and Jake could hear strange sounds coming from behind locked doors. Today, you meet your cooperation partners, Zefka said. 2 species that attempted the Crucible before you. They failed the cooperation phase, and now serve as training subjects for new candidates. The first door opened, and 3 large creatures walked out. They looked like bears that could stand on 2 legs, but their fur was dark red and their eyes glowed yellow. Each one was almost 7 feet tall and had muscles that made Amy Richardson look small. These are the Valkyrie, Zefka explained. They are a warrior species. They failed the Crucible 50 years ago because they could not work peacefully with others. They see cooperation as weakness. The largest Valkyrie stepped forward and spoke in a deep, growling voice. I am War Leader Grex. You humans look soft and weak. This cooperation test will be another failure for us because of your limitations. Jake tried to stay calm, but he could see that Grex was trying to intimidate them. We're here to work together, not to fight. Grex laughed, showing sharp teeth. Everything is fighting. The strong survive, the weak serve. This is the natural way. The second door opened, and something very different came out. At first, Jake thought it was just one creature. Then he realized it was actually 5 beings that moved together like they shared the same mind. They looked like tall, thin humans, but their skin was pale blue, and they never spoke individually. The Nethys, Zefka said. A collective consciousness, species. They failed because they could not demonstrate individual thought or initiative. They think as one mind in 5 bodies. The Nethys spoke all at the same time, their voices creating an eerie harmony. We greet the humans. We failed because the evaluators demanded individual choice. We do not understand how one mind can disagree with itself. Dr. Helen Martinez felt sorry for both groups. They had been prisoners here for decades, forced to repeat the same tests over and over with new species. What exactly do we have to do together? Kevin Walsh asked. Zefka led them to a large chamber with a complex machine in the center. The machine had multiple levels, spinning parts, and glowing crystals. It looked broken. This device must be repaired and activated, Zefka explained. It requires 3 different approaches. The Valkyrie strength and precision, the Nethys perfect coordination, and whatever the humans can contribute. You have 6 hours. The alien evaluator left them alone with the machine. For several minutes, nobody moved. The 3 groups stood apart, studying each other suspiciously. Grex and his 2 warriors, Thok and Borg, walked around the machine like they were planning to attack it. The Nethys moved together to examine the crystals, their movements perfectly synchronized. The humans spread out to look at different parts of the device. This is pointless, Grex growled. The weak ones will slow us down. Individual actions create chaos, the Nethys said together. Disorder leads to failure. Amy Richardson had enough of the negative attitude. She walked up to Grex even though he was twice her size. You want to know about strength? Real strength isn't about muscles. It's about adapting to any situation. Grex leaned down to stare at her. You think you can teach warriors about strength, little human? I think you've been losing the same test for 50 years, Amy said without backing down. Maybe it's time to try something different. Meanwhile, Dr. Alan Brooks was trying to communicate with the Nethys. Can you help us understand how your collective mind works? We think as water flows, they replied. One direction, one purpose, no conflict. But what if conflict isn't bad? Alan asked. What if disagreement helps find better solutions? Kevin Walsh was studying the machine with Dr. Lisa Garcia. Look at this, he said. The bottom level needs heavy lifting and precise placement. That's perfect for the Velkari strength. Lisa nodded. The middle level has these crystals that need to be aligned perfectly. The Nethys could do that better than anyone. And the top level? Paul Johnson asked. Kevin smiled. That's where we come in. It needs creative problem-solving and flexible thinking. Jake gathered everyone together. We each have different strengths. Instead of fighting about whose way is better, let's use all our ways together. Grex crossed his massive arms. Velkari do not follow weak leadership. I'm not asking you to follow, Jake said. I'm asking you to lead the part you're best at. This got Grex's attention. Explain. Amy stepped forward. You're warriors, right? Warriors protect their team. Right now, your team includes all of us. The machine is the enemy we need to defeat. Grex thought about this. In Velkari culture, protecting the team was the highest honor. The machine is our enemy? The machine is broken, Amy said. We need to defeat the breakdown and make it work again. Dr. Helen Martinez tried a different approach with the Nethys. What if we don't ask you to think individually? What if we ask you to help us think collectively? We do not understand, they said. You can share thoughts between your 5 bodies, right? What if you help us share thoughts between all our different groups? The Nethys were quiet for a moment. Then they said, You wish us to create connection between separated minds? Exactly, Helen said. The work began slowly. The Velkari used their strength to move the heavy parts at the bottom of the machine. But instead of just using force, Amy showed them how to be precise. Warriors need accuracy, she explained. A sword that misses its target is useless. Thok, the youngest Velkari, was surprisingly good at delicate work when he focused. This is like crafting weapons, he said. Strength without control destroys the blade. The Nethys worked on the crystal alignment in the middle level, but Dr. Frank Turner, the biologist, helped them see that small variations could be useful. In nature, diversity creates strength, he explained. Maybe the crystals work better when they're almost the same, but not exactly the same. The Nethys experimented with tiny differences in crystal placement. Variation within harmony, they said with wonder. We have never considered this concept. The humans tackled the top level, but they asked for help from both other groups. When they needed something held steady, they asked the Velkari. When they needed perfect timing, they asked the Nethys. Carol Evans, the pilot, discovered something important. The whole machine is like flying a spacecraft. You need power from the engines, coordination from the navigation system, and creativity from the pilot to handle unexpected problems. As they worked together, something unexpected happened. The group started understanding each other better. Grex admitted that the humans were not weak. Your Amy thinks like a warrior, but she fights with her mind instead of claws. The Nethys said, The humans show us that individual thoughts can work together without becoming the same thought. With 1 hour left, the machine was almost ready. But there was one final problem. The device needed to be activated by 3 different commands given at exactly the same time. The timing had to be perfect. This is impossible, Grex said. We cannot coordinate between 3 different groups. Yes, we can, Helen said. The Nethys can help us. The Nethys created a mental link that let all 3 groups feel when the others were ready. It wasn't full mind sharing, but it was enough to coordinate their actions. Now, the Nethys said. All 3 groups activated their parts of the machine, simultaneously. The device hummed to life, its crystals glowing brightly and its parts spinning in perfect harmony. Zefka returned just as the machine completed its startup sequence. The alien evaluator looked at the working device with surprise. Remarkable, Zefka said. You succeeded faster than any previous group. But Jake was looking at Grex and the Nethys. What happens to them now? Do they get to try the crucible again? They remain here as training subjects, Zefka said. Their failure was permanent. That's not fair, Amy said angrily. They didn't fail this test. We all succeeded together. The cooperation phase tests candidates, not subjects, Zefka replied. Their purpose is to assist in your evaluation. Jake felt sick. The Velkari and Nethys weren't really being tested. They were being used as tools to test others. They had been prisoners all along, forced to help evaluate species that might join the galaxy while they remained trapped. What if we refuse to continue without them? Jake asked. Zefka's large eyes narrowed. That would be considered failure. Your species would face the same fate as theirs. The humans looked at each other. They had learned something important during the cooperation phase. The problem wasn't that some species failed the crucible. The problem was that the crucible itself was designed to create failures. When does the final phase begin? Helen asked, quietly. Tomorrow, Zefka said. The sacrifice phase will test whether your species understands what truly matters. Many species fail because they choose the wrong thing to sacrifice. As they were led back to their quarters, Grex whispered to Jake, Your species shows promise. Do not let them make you like us. The Nethys added, The system is flawed. We see this now through your eyes. That night, the human team met in secret. They all felt the same way. The crucible wasn't a fair test, it was a system designed to keep the galaxy under the control of species like the Corvani. We can't let them do to us what they did to the Velkari and Nethys, Amy said. The third day at the crucible began differently. Instead of taking the human team to another test chamber, Zefka led them to a viewing room with large windows that looked out into space. Through the windows, they could see Earth in the distance, beautiful and blue against the black sky. Today begins the final phase, Zefka announced. The sacrifice. This test determines whether a species truly understands what matters most in the universe. Jake felt his stomach tighten. What kind of sacrifice? You will be given a choice, the alien evaluator explained. 3 options, each requiring a different sacrifice. Only one choice leads to success. The other 2 lead to failure and consequences for your entire species. Dr. Helen Martinez looked out at Earth, thinking about her family down there. Her daughter was probably getting ready for school right now. What are the 3 choices? Zefka activated a holographic display that showed 3 different scenarios. The first image showed the 12 humans staying on the moon forever, working for the Corvani Collective. The second showed Earth surrounded by an energy barrier that would keep humanity isolated from the galaxy. The third showed Earth itself disappearing in a flash of light. Choice 1, Zefka said. Your 12 representatives sacrifice their freedom and serve the collective as advisors. Your species joins the galaxy but under our guidance and control. Amy Richardson clenched her fists. That's not joining as equals. That's becoming servants. Choice 2, Zefka continued. Your species sacrifices galactic contact. Earth is sealed away from the rest of the universe forever. You develop alone, but you never join the galactic community. Kevin Walsh studied the energy barrier in the hologram. As an engineer, he could see that it wasn't just for keeping humans in. It was designed to keep everything else out too. Complete isolation. No trade, no learning, no growth beyond what we can do by ourselves. Choice 3, Zefka said, and the alien's voice became colder. Your species sacrifices its existence. Earth is destroyed to prevent the chaos your unpredictable nature might cause to galactic order. Dr. Paul Johnson stepped forward. You're asking us to choose between slavery, prison, or death? I am asking you to choose what sacrifice your species is willing to make for the greater good of the galaxy, Zefka replied. This is the ultimate test of moral development. Jake looked around at his team. Every face showed the same expression of anger and disbelief. What if we refuse to choose any of these options? Refusal to choose is considered an act of rebellion, Zefka said. Rebellion results in automatic selection of choice 3. Doctor? Lisa Garcia had been quiet, but now she spoke up. How many species have passed this test? Zefka paused before answering. Every species that has joined the Galactic Collective has demonstrated their understanding of necessary sacrifice. That's not what I asked, Lisa said. How many species chose option 1 and actually joined as equals? Another pause. All successful species serve the collective in appropriate roles. Helen realized what this meant. None of them joined as equals. They all became servants or they were destroyed. The collective provides order and stability to the galaxy, Zefka said. Individual species contribute according to their abilities and place in the hierarchy. Amy couldn't stay quiet anymore. Your test is rigged. There is no right answer because all the answers lead to the same result. Either we serve you, or we die. You have 6 hours to decide, Zefka said, ignoring her protest. The choice must be unanimous among your 12 representatives. After Zefka left, the humans gathered together. Everyone was angry, but Jake knew anger wouldn't solve their problem. We need to think about this differently, he said. What if the real test isn't choosing one of their options? What if it's finding a fourth option they didn't give us? Dr. Steve Wright, the mathematician, had been analyzing the facility's design since they arrived. I've been studying the energy patterns in this place. The whole structure is powered by something incredible, but there's a flaw in the design. Kevin Walsh looked interested. What kind of flaw? The builders think in straight lines and rigid categories, Steve explained. They built this facility to contain and control, but they assumed every species would think the same way they do. Carol Evans, the pilot, understood what Steve meant. Like building an airplane that only flies in perfect weather. It works until conditions change. Dr. Frank Turner had been thinking about the biological aspects of what they'd seen. The Velkari and Nethys aren't really failed species. They just think differently than the Corvani expect. Their differences could be strengths in the right situation. Helen had an idea forming. What if we don't just refuse their choices? What if we prove their whole system is wrong? How? Paul asked. By showing that diversity makes civilization stronger, not weaker, Helen said. By proving that their fear of chaos and unpredictability is actually holding the galaxy back. Kevin was studying the structure of the room they were in. If Steve is right about the design flaw, maybe we can use it. These aliens built everything to control and contain, but human engineering is about adaptation and flexibility. Amy grinned. You're talking about breaking out of prison. Not just breaking out, Jake said, understanding the plan. Breaking the prison itself, freeing everyone who's been trapped here. They spent the next 4 hours working on their plan. Kevin and Steve studied the facility's energy systems. Helen and Alan worked on communication methods that could reach other imprisoned species. Lisa and Frank analyzed the alien technology to understand its weaknesses. Amy and Carol planned security measures. Paul and Ron prepared medical and technical support. Dr. Nancy Clark studied the geological structure of their location. The plan was risky. Instead of choosing one of Zefka's 3 options, they would create their own option. They would use the facility's own systems to free the Velkari, Nethys, and any other imprisoned species. Then they would broadcast the truth about the Crucible to every species in the galaxy. But the most important part of the plan was proving that cooperation between different species was better than the Corvani's system of control. We'll need help. From Grex and the Nethys, Jake said. Can we trust them? They've been prisoners here for decades, Amy said. They want freedom as much as we do. Helen had been working on the communication problem. I think I can reach them through the facility's internal systems. The Corvani use their communication network to monitor everyone, but they might not notice messages disguised as routine data. Kevin had found something important in his study of the energy systems. The whole facility is powered by a central core. If we can modify it, we can change how everything else works. Instead of keeping people in, we can break the barriers down. But won't that be dangerous? Paul asked. Everything we're doing is dangerous, Carol said. But staying here and accepting their unfair test is more dangerous. With 1 hour left before they had to give their answer, Jake sent a coded message to Grex and the Nethys. The message was simple. Do you want to be free? The response came quickly. From Grex, Velkari fight for freedom. From the Nethys, we choose cooperation over control. Jake looked around at his team one more time. Everyone ready? They all nodded. When Zefka returned, Jake stood up to speak for all humanity. We've made our choice, he said. Which sacrifice? Has your species selected? Zefka asked. Jake smiled. We choose the fourth option. We sacrifice the old way of thinking that says some species must serve others. We choose to prove that diversity makes everyone stronger. Zefka's large eyes widened. There is no fourth option. You must choose from the three possibilities presented. No, Helen said, standing beside Jake. We refuse to accept a test designed to create failures. Your refusal will result in the destruction of your world, Zefka warned. Amy stepped forward. Then you'll have to get through us first. At that moment, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Kevin's modifications to the energy core were working. The barriers holding the Velkari and Nethys were shutting down. Communication systems were broadcasting messages to imprisoned species throughout the facility. What have you done? Zefka demanded. What humans do best, Jake said. We changed the rules of a game that was rigged against us. The revolution had begun. The alarms grew louder as barriers throughout the facility began shutting down. Zefka spoke rapidly into a communication device, calling for security forces. But the humans had planned for this. The security systems are controlled by the same energy core we modified, Kevin Walsh explained to the angry alien evaluator. Your own technology is working against you now. Grex and his 2 Velkari warriors burst into the room, followed by the 5 Nethys moving in perfect formation. Behind them came other species that had been imprisoned in the facility. Jake counted at least 12 different types of aliens, all looking confused but hopeful. The barriers are down throughout the facility, Grex announced with satisfaction. Many years of imprisonment are ending today. The Nethys spoke together. We sense freedom approaching. The rigid order is breaking apart. Zefka activated an emergency communication system that reached beyond the facility. This is High Evaluator Zefka. The human candidates have initiated rebellion, requesting immediate intervention from the Galactic Fleet. On the communication screen, another Corvani appeared. This one wore symbols that showed higher rank. High Command understands, preparing to destroy the human homeworld as a lesson to other potential rebels. Jake felt his heart stop. You're going to destroy Earth because we won't accept your unfair test? Order must be maintained, Zefka said coldly. Your species has proven too chaotic to exist safely in the galaxy. Dr. Helen Martinez stepped forward. Then you'll have to explain to the entire galaxy why you destroyed a species for refusing to be slaves. No one will question the decision, Zefka replied. The collective's authority is absolute. But Kevin had been working on something else while they talked. He had connected the facility's communication systems to every imprisoned species' homeworlds. Actually, everyone is going to question it. We're broadcasting everything live to the entire galaxy. On screens throughout the room, they could see the signal reaching star system after star system. Species that had never been allowed to communicate with each other were suddenly seeing and hearing the truth about the Crucible. Dr. Alan Brooks had been working with the Nethys to translate the broadcast into dozens of different languages. Every species in the galaxy is watching what happens here, he announced. The response was immediate. Messages began pouring in from across the galaxy. Species that had been forced to join the collective as servants were expressing support for the human rebellion. Others that had been isolated or destroyed were sending evidence of the Corvani's cruel methods. Amy Richardson coordinated with Grex to establish defensive positions around the facility's critical systems. How long before their fleet arrives? She asked. Dr. Lisa Garcia was monitoring space around the moon. I'm detecting ships approaching, but they're not all Corvani vessels. Ships from other species are coming too. On the main communication screen, a new face appeared. It belonged to a species that looked like crystalline trees with glowing branches. This is the Zephyrian Council. We have monitored your broadcast. Many species wish to join your rebellion against the collective's tyranny. More species appeared, on other communication channels. A group that looked like intelligent dolphins swimming in floating water bubbles. Bird-like creatures with feathers that changed color as they spoke. Even some Corvani who disagreed with their own government's methods. Impossible, Zefka said, watching the growing rebellion. The collective has maintained order for 1,000 years. Dr. Frank Turner had been studying the biological data from all the different species. That's exactly the problem. 1,000 years without change, without growth, without diversity. You've created a galaxy-wide prison. Carol Evans was working with Kevin to modify the facility's systems even further. We're not just freeing the prisoners here, we're turning this whole place into a communication hub where different species can meet and work together. The Corvani fleet arrived first, but they found themselves facing an unexpected situation. Ships from dozens of other species had surrounded the facility, forming a protective barrier. The rebellion had spread across the galaxy in just a few hours. Zefka received another communication from High Command. The high-ranking Corvani looked worried now. High Evaluator, we are receiving protests from every sector of the galaxy. Many of our subject species are threatening rebellion if we destroy the human homeworld. Then we destroy them all, Zefka said desperately. Negative, High Command replied. That would require destroying most of the galaxy. The collective cannot survive such action. Jake saw an opportunity. What if there was a better way? What if instead of controlling everyone, you let everyone contribute their best abilities? Chaos would result, Zefka insisted. Helen had been working with representatives from multiple species through the communication network. Actually, we've been testing your theory for the past 6 hours. Look around. All these different species, working together. Where's the chaos? It was true. Throughout the facility, humans, Velkari, Nethys, and dozens of other species were cooperating to modify systems, share information, and solve problems. Instead of chaos, there was organized but flexible cooperation. Dr. Paul Johnson was treating injured aliens who had been prisoners for decades. Different medical knowledge from different species is helping us heal problems we couldn't solve alone, he reported. Dr. Steve Wright was working with mathematicians from 6 different species. We're solving equations that none of our individual species could handle. Our different ways of thinking make us stronger, not weaker. On the communication screens, they could see similar cooperation happening throughout the galaxy. Species that had been forced apart were meeting again and discovering that their differences created new possibilities instead of problems. The moment of final decision came when the Corvani High Command appeared on the main screen for a direct conversation with the humans. You have created unprecedented disruption to galactic order, the High Command said. What do you propose as an alternative? Jake looked around at all the different species working together in the facility. We propose a galaxy where everyone contributes their best abilities without being controlled by anyone else. A place where diversity is celebrated instead of feared. And who would maintain order in such a system? High Command asked. Everyone, Amy said. When people are free to contribute their strengths, they work together to solve problems instead of creating them. The Nethys added, we have learned that unity does not require identical thinking. Harmony can exist with diversity. Grex spoke for the Velkari. Strength comes from protecting differences, not destroying them. High Command was quiet for a long time. Finally, they spoke again. The collective will need time to consider these proposals. Take all the time you need, Helen said. But while you're considering, we'll be building the kind of galaxy we want to live in. 5 years later, Jake Thompson stood on the observation deck of the Luna Station, which had once been the Crucible facility. The moon now hosted the first Galactic Diversity Center, where species from across the galaxy came to learn from each other. Through the windows, he could see ships from hundreds of different worlds docked at the station. Earth had become the unofficial meeting place for species that wanted to work together, instead of being controlled by others. Dr. Helen Martinez ran the center's translation department, where humans worked with Nethys collective consciousness and Corvani logical systems to create new ways for different minds to communicate. Her daughter, now in college, was studying xenobiology with students from 12 different species. Kevin Walsh led engineering teams that combined technologies from across the galaxy in ways no single species had ever imagined. Amy Richardson trained peacekeeping forces that protected diversity instead of enforcing conformity. The Corvani Collective still existed, but it had changed. Many Corvani had joined the diversity movement, including Zefka, who now worked to help species understand each other instead of judging them. "Any regrets?" Amy asked, joining Jake at the observation window. Jake watched a group of young humans playing with Velkari cubs and Nethys younglings in the station's park. "About refusing to accept an unfair test? Never." "What do you think would have happened if we had just chosen one of their 3 options?" Jake smiled. "We'd probably still be taking tests, trying to prove we deserved freedom instead of just taking it." A communication signal came through the station's systems. It was from a newly discovered species asking for help with their first contact protocols. They had heard about the Luna station and wanted to meet other species as equals instead of as subjects to be judged. "Looks like humanity has another ultimate test to take," Amy said with a grin. "Good thing we're getting better at changing the rules," Jake replied. As the new species ship approached the station, Jake reflected on what humanity had learned. Their greatest strength wasn't their technology or their courage. It was their refusal to accept that things had to stay the way they had always been. When faced with an impossible choice, humans didn't just pick the best bad option. They created better options. The galaxy was bigger now, more diverse, more chaotic, and more wonderful than the Corvani had ever allowed it to be. And it was still growing.